Hi, it's Mark Owen from Moose Marketing and PR, the editor of Punchline magazine, and welcome to Punchline Talks, the business breakfast briefers, where each week I invite a panel of business experts to talk about the local newspapers, talk about the national newspapers, talk about the local business, what's happening in the local business community, and finally, what's caught their eye in this week's Punchline. We're going to quickly scoop through my fantastic guests. We've got Tim Gwilliam, leader of the Forest District Council, the Progressive Independent Party. We've got Adam Coleman, he's the Chief Executive of Gloucester Culture Trust. Chris Price, Director of PACT Property, and Sam Holliday, Development Manager of the Federation of Small Business. I'm going to go over to the national newspapers. Hold on a second. I've lost my bit already. Goodness gracious. Hold on, let me share my screen. Okay, there we go. Right, let's quickly run through the nationals. We've got the Times, Tories plot Sunak and modern leadership. The Financial Times, Truss ready to rip up tax cut package and in desperate bid to save premiership. The Eye, PM plans tax cut U-turn while Kwarteng is out of the country. The Daily Telegraph, Kwarteng insists, I'm not going anywhere. Well, I think he's coming home, isn't he? The Guardian, Truss prepares new mini budget U-turn. The Daily Mail, PM has 17 days to save her job. Probably even less now. The Daily Express, tax U-turn on cards in battle to calm the markets. The Daily Star, which wet lettuce would last longer. The Metro, I am evil, I did this. This is a story of the nurse that allegedly has killed the babies. Terrible, terrible story. The Sun, underhand of God. The Mirror, Gary Lineker, our message to Qatar. Okay, let's kick off the papers. Sam, what have you picked for us, please? There's only one story, really. Let's be honest.
There is really. I mean, as a big football fan, I'd like to have talked about Gary Lineker, but really, you can't get beyond the politics. And I've got the Times and the Eye, and it's extraordinary. I think I might have mentioned to you, Mark, that the BBC's Chris Mason did a piece yesterday saying that this feels like the end days of a prime minister, when it's literally within 4 or 5 weeks of her taking over. And I've never seen such an extraordinary turnaround in somebody's fortunes. There's every politician, and Tim will have known this, when he was elected, gets a little honeymoon period where people give you the benefit of the doubt, even if they didn't vote for you. Not like that at all. And the thing I found most telling in the papers today, Mark, was I just looked at it goes back to page 10 of the Times. And there's a thing about opinion polls. And I know we can take these with a little bit of a pinch of salt, but the second paragraph said, in a YouGov poll for the Times, not a single political group, age group, area of the country, gender, or any other demographic said that Liz Truss had been the right choice as Prime Minister. And Mark, they're Tory voters. They aren't Labour supporters. All Tory. I mean, do you know what? I'm going to say something quite bold here. I do not blame Liz Truss or Kwasi Kwarteng. I blame the 80,000 people that chose someone who's completely out of their depth. And I hate to say that, but I think we're up against her, and we're an apolitical, the FSB, I'm apolitical, but Rishi Sunak was a fairly sensible guy that did a lot for businesses during the furlough. He was quite steady, he wasn't very flash, but compared to Liz Truss, who's basically just an ideologue that appealed to further and further to the right when she was talking to Tory voters, and 80,000 people voted for her. And I think she's just been over promoted. All of us in industry, all of us in business will have met people that have been over promoted in their jobs. And sometimes they can be moved on swiftly. This is the Prime Minister. I'm afraid at the moment, I see no evidence that they're going to get this back. And another thing, you and I, Mark, and people on this panel will have talked on Punchline before about, should Boris go? Do you remember we had endless debates, should Boris go? When Boris left Parliament, which seems like an age ago now, but wasn't, he was 5% behind Labour in the polls. That's bad, but it's recoverable. They're now 30 points behind. It's extraordinary. It's absolutely extraordinary.
He was driven out by the media, though, the hysterical media that we've got in this country. That's what I think. Who will remember in 10 years' time about wallpaper, about trips, about all that sort of stuff, pizzas? Who knows? Nobody gives a damn.
But with the, but you may be right, because what we'll remember is now when mortgages are being withdrawn and they can't sell their house, or when I mean that 45p tax. I sat there with open mouth, and something else shocked me today on Wednesday. I watched Prime Minister's Questions. I always enjoyed watching that, because that's how you learn both sides of the debate. And she said there would be no cuts in public services. Now Tim knows, he leads a council. If they've got £43 billion worth of tax cuts and they're not going to cut public service, and I would say no politician from the leftist to the left to the rightist to the right should ever say that, ever, because we don't know what's going to happen with the economy, and the economy is tanking. And for her to stand up and say there'll be no cuts to public service, I thought, what are you doing? So I'm sorry, Mark, she's out of her depth.
She is. She's totally out of her depth, totally inept. Okay, very quickly, I'm going to go around the panel. How long will she last? Will she make Christmas? Has she got longer than a turkey? Just very quickly, Sam, longer than a turkey, yes or no? Christmas?
I don't know. I'm bewildered by the Tory party. I can't understand.
Adam, will she go before Christmas?
I really don't know, but what I do want to see happen is more public engagement with, like, you know, how angry do we feel? There's too much political apathy. So the more people, and I mean everyday people on the street in Gloucester, care about these political things, the stronger we're going to be in voting people in. But will she actually be gone? God knows.
Chris, gone before Christmas?
I suspect she probably will be gone, because the real effects of her policies will start to come through and affect everybody individually. And that's actually what I should be talking about this morning. It's not so much the politics, it's the effect of it.
Let's come back to you now in a second. I'll just quickly ask the same question. Tim, will she make it to Christmas?
I feel she may. I think I've said this morning, you start to see all of a sudden it's all starting to be the Chancellor's fault. And I think he's going to go without a shadow of a doubt. I suspect they'll try and bring somebody else in and say it was all Quaz's fault. It was Quaz's idea. That will be her defence. And the Conservative Party are that inept, they'll let her get away with it.
Okay, thanks ever so much. Right, Chris, let's talk about the markets and the effect it's having on business and things. What's going on?
I'll just quickly try to summarise what's happened. And obviously, rising interest rates were happening prior to the mini budget. People mustn't forget that there was rises in interest rates. The mini budget created further uncertainty, which I think unsettled all the markets I deal with, and largely the property markets. And it's really because of the rising borrowing costs and interest rates. So they're not aligned entirely. But I was talking to one of the senior investment managers at CBRE only a couple of days ago, and he said that he didn't think there was a single deal over £50 million in London that was still on the table. A deal that had been agreed prior to the budget that was actually still on the table now. So it's caused absolute carnage within the investment market, and that will filter down to local sales. Local property prices will fall. I have absolutely no doubt about that. I'm really talking about the commercial market here. Speaking to Howard tenants, who are large logistic occupiers, owners of warehousing, yesterday, they are seeing demand from occupiers remaining quite strong. Their concern is whether those occupiers, because of rising utility costs, because of difficulties with labour and the squeeze on profits, what that will look like in 6 months' time. So at the moment, they're saying the small businesses, the SMEs, etc., that occupy their units are okay. They are, however, do fear for what it might look like in a year's time. What is driving rents at the moment and maintaining rents is the lack of supply. There is a shortage of available accommodation, and with that shortage of supply, means that the values are standing up. And if somebody did leave at the moment, they believe they will find new people for those units. But the outlook does look more uncertain, and certainly rising costs are going to affect the profitability and viability, I guess, of those businesses going forward.
It's funny, you know, a couple of weeks ago we were talking about lots of companies struggling because they couldn't find people to fill the positions, and I think, unfortunately, a lot of people might lose their jobs and they might be able to fill those positions somewhere else. I just feel we tread in water. I don't want to be too negative, but Tim, thanks ever so much for that, Chris. Tim, obviously the front pages in the papers. What's your take on it all?
It's total, as I said, it's just ineptitude. I mean, we have people running this country that are just not capable of doing it. I mean, you know, Adam was referring to it earlier, as was Sam. And you don't even have to be political about it. We all know Conservative members. We've got a Conservative MP down here in Forestry. Now, not for a minute would I share his politics. I wouldn't, you know, I wouldn't buy the guy a pipe probably. But at least I know he can tie his shoelaces up. And I know that if he was actually in, you know, some sort of position, he'd be doing it properly with diligence. This started playing at it. For me, they're like, we even have some councillors at local council, they just do it to get their name on a ballot paper. And they just want to do it. And it's just some sort of status thing. These people are doing that, and they're gambling with this country's future and you know, our people, our kids' future. Even going down to, you know, we had all the levelling up stuff, which is great. For us, that down in the forest, that was great. Did Liz Truss mention it in her first speech? That seems to have gone now. How can you be levelling up and have trickle down economics at the same time? That doesn't seem to work for me. I don't see how that works. They are ruining the value of the pound. You've already seen diesel going back up just because we buy it in dollars for some reason. So that's affecting everything. And similarly, you know, we had that funding for the levelling up funding. We're really getting on with that. But the £9.2 million we had in July isn't worth 9.2 million now. So suddenly all the costs are going up, everything's going up. And what we planned to do back in July is suddenly becoming, there's a bit of a gap there. And all these gaps will just be passed out. We don't just need a change of leadership, we need a change of government. I don't care which party it is, but it's going to be a total reset.
Okay, thanks ever so much for that, Tim. Let's go over to you, Adam. So what have you picked out from the papers? Have you go with the main story as well?
Yeah, I did, but I also wanted, I as much as possible, I always try to look at the Sun newspaper. My dad was a decorator he read the Sun newspaper every day, and I always go to the Guardian, and I need to challenge myself. What are people really reading? I am intrigued that actually, if you on the front paper of the online Sun, they're actually talking about Phil and Holly at the television awards last night. So, and I do think it's really interesting that, you know, and that is all related. Apparently people have got beef with them because they jumped the queue for the Queen's funeral. And what I'm interested in, there's this lingering feeling and national mood which is still thinking about the Queen's passing whilst all this political stuff is happening, and you know the complexities of inherited wealth there. And what feels interesting for me is that at this moment actually politics appears to be raising up a bit more, and people are really beginning to realize that actually whoever is in power does have effect on how much money they've got in their pockets. And I just trickle down economics, it doesn't work, it hasn't worked. All the evidence shows it is not helping. In Gloucester we have entrenched poverty. I'm not, you know, trickle down economics is not working for them, it never will. So what I'm really, I suppose it's a really depressing situation, but what I'm feel hopeful for is a stronger public dialogue about the politics of this country and what might need to happen in order to look after each other.
It's funny, I was grown up, when I went to boarding school, what I was taught is that we had the Daily Mail as a paper, and then we had the Daily Mirror. And I remember the teachers telling me that somewhere in the middle is the truth. And again, it's, you know, I got today's Daily Mail, and I actually bought the Mirror as well. And you're dead right. They actually concentrated more on the national TV awards. The Sun did. Maybe they just had enough of politics. Maybe it doesn't sell. Maybe we're all just sick and tired of it all. Who knows? Anyway, thanks ever so much for that. Sam, let's go back over to you and about the small business community and the knock-on effect it's having. And then we'll go over to Chris, because Chris doesn't have very much time today. Sam, what's the kind of mood out there? I've been delivering punchlines everywhere. High Street, well, you tell me.
I mean, to be honest, I think Chris made the point that interest rates were going up before. We had problems before. The FSB does quarterly confidence reports, and the last one we did before all this happened was the figures were on the floor. And yes, it was things that we may not worry about too much in the future, like people can get positions filled, because that might change. But confidence is at a very, very low ebb, because for small businesses, they know that their customers are struggling, so they've got to do everything they can to help their customers. But the problem is all their own costs are rising enormously, and not just utilities. Anything you import, anything that you buy from a different supplier, they're charging more. So every small business in Gloucestershire has the same dilemma. Do they charge more to make sure they can afford their own bills and risk losing customers, or do they just take it on the chin? And the problem is they can't keep taking it on the chin. I mean, a lot of them got through furlough, and by getting through furlough, it wasn't just because of the furlough money that was provided by the government. They raided into any savings they had. Any personal money that they had went to keep the business alive. And there was a collective feeling at the start of this year, phew, we've got through that. Now let's push on. But this has derailed everything again. And I'm already hearing businesses talking about if we can just get through the next 12 months. And I'm thinking they've been saying this for 2 or 3 years, and sadly some won't. So you and I, Mark, we've said this before, extremely positive people. It's very hard to be positive at the moment, despite our best efforts. I
tell you the other thing is a lot of people, they got those those bounce back loans of 50,000, they put them in their bank account, and then a lot of companies had to spend them. Now what's happened is the government is wanting that money back at £866 a month from a repayment.
I genuinely think, Mark, that you know, people were getting grants and loans confused at one point because there were so many of both coming through. And I think a lot of people took on them bounce back loans just in case. And it's like anything, if you sort of say, I'll just put this money into the side, but I won't touch it because of an emergency. It's amazing what becomes an emergency very quickly. So I'm worried. I'm very worried about that.
Okay, no, thanks so much. Let's go over to you, Chris. Obviously, you're an insolvency expert as well.
I'll pick one sector where I'm seeing real meltdown at the moment is breweries. I think they're being hit from rising energy costs, obviously, rising inputting costs. And if you look around at the moment, there are a number of local breweries in the West Country, Skinner's one, that are basically insolvent and will be insolvent. So they are getting squeezed at both ends. People aren't buying, their costs are rising. And there doesn't seem to be a future for those sort of industries at the moment. Quite where else it will all go, I think any industries that are heavily energy dependent at the moment and haven't been hedging correctly with their energy costs going forward, it's going to be a problem. I'm a director at Horsfall House Nursing Home. We've got 44 very vulnerable people who have to have warm rooms. Our energy bill last year was £50,000. We expect it to be somewhere north of £150,000 this year. Now, for Horsfall House, that's manageable. It's a charity, it's a very well-funded charity, and it's a properly run charity. For many, many other nursing homes or people which have to spend on energy, it's going to be a huge issue. It really is.
It's going to kill off a lot of businesses. You know, I was talking to someone in a hotel, and there's no way on earth she could heat that hotel the whole year. So what she's actually thinking is closing the hotel from, you know, December, January, February, March, maybe, mothballing it, and then reopening after that when it gets a bit warmer, so she doesn't have to.
I mean, I personally find it extraordinary that we are potentially putting, I think the figure that's being quoted is about 60 billion to support households with their energy bills, and almost nothing has been done with regard to insulation and making homes fit for a lower energy future. The way building regs is run is an absolute joke, in my opinion. The fact that you could build a new house and not have to put a heat pump or solar on the roof when you build it, it is ridiculous. Retrofitting those will cost 4 times as much as it would do if you put them in the first place. And yet there is no obligation on developers to provide those. I find it, that is absolute incompetence, in my opinion.
It's the same as when they build a new factory. Why can't they just put solar panels on the roof straight away as a, yeah, it must be good.
No, I'm not just talking about solar, whether it's grey water that goes in. It'll create all sorts of different industries and skills as well to sit alongside it. So I don't know what it would do for employment. It's certainly not net zero, but it has been said to me the reason it hasn't been done is that by doing so, you reduce the value of the land, because obviously the costs do increase. If the house price stays the same, the value comes off the land, whether that's true or not.
I think it's all about the Wonga, mate. That's what it's about. Thanks for that, Chris. Just very quickly, insolvencies, are they going up?
They will rise. They're not rising particularly strongly yet, but they will do. Interest rate rises will. You know, we are going back to a situation where we're likely to have interest rates at 6%. Now, for those of us who have been around for quite a long time, you will remember those back in the 80s. They weren't 6 or 7% were not unusual back in the 80s, but for the last 20 years, we've lived in a very, very low interest rate environment, and people are just not used to interest rates of 6 or 7%.
And they're not being funny, they owe a lot of money to a lot of other people. They've got cars on hire, they've got this and that on hire, they go on holidays, they pay off. It's a completely different ballgame from when we were younger. We would save to go somewhere. Anyway, I better move on. Thanks ever so much for that, Chris. Adam, let's bring you in if that's okay. Obviously, I've got to know you from the Gloucester City Commission. You've done a fantastic job as Chief Executive of Gloucester Culture Trust. How important is culture, I would imagine, to the city of Gloucester and business?
I think you know what I'm going to say here. Yes, and my interest is the cultural sector. We know that as a sector, it's developing jobs faster than any other sector. And we know that our young people in Gloucestershire want to move into the cultural industries. And the reality is they'll probably move to Cardiff or Bristol if they can't find the job. And when they choose to settle, they'll probably want to bring their family up in a place that's interesting, that's cool, that's got things going on. Can we get them back to Gloucester? The challenge is, you know, making Gloucester a thriving city and, you know, really feeling like a city, not a town, feeling like the county city where there are things happening. We know that money follows culture. So, you know, the multiplier effect of culture is huge. It brings footfall, people spend, the indirect spend on culture is huge. Now, you know, things are changing in this city. We've got historically, we've had a very underdeveloped cultural sector, very low levels of cultural investment. Things are changing. Last night I was at Guildhall, an amazing show. You know, earlier this week I visited the exhibition in Eastgate Market by 100 Heroines. Things are popping up. These are generally being developed kind of independently by the independent cultural sector. And what we're really pushing for is we need an understanding across the private, public and third sector about smart investment in culture as an integral element of the city's development. All the evidence shows that if you invest in culture, it drives economic and social development. It's a no-brainer. But it's, you know, it's not easy, it's not hard. What I'm not saying, culture isn't a magic pill. It's not going to make any less people homeless. It's not going to solve social ills. But what it will do is bring pride into the city. And you know, Gloucester's a great place. It's great because it feels unlike anywhere else in Gloucestershire. It's young, it's diverse, it's urban. And I really, you know, we need to celebrate that. And a big way to do that is to get behind culture and artists. And there's so much more to do.
Now, we were part of that commission, and you actually wrote a letter, if you don't mind me raising this, you wrote a letter to the commission saying that actually enough wasn't being done. And I mean, included in the actual report itself. I mean, does it invest enough money that you see, or is it, come on, let's be honest about it. You know, are they putting the money where it needs to go?
Yes, okay, so if you want a bit of a history lesson, so as a district sector authority, it does invest in culture. So let's recognise Gloucester City Council does invest in spaces like Guildhall, that's great. But come on, we're in new times. Local authority is about enabling, strategic enabling. Just keeping Guildhall open is not enough. We are more ambitious than that. We need culture to be part of a broader economic plan. It needs to be part of a nighttime economy plan. When this university campus opens in Gloucester, we need reasons for those young people to spend their cash in the city and to bring their mates into the city. So there's not enough of a commitment. There is not enough of an understanding of how culture can be a drive. So we will continue to push that, and I don't think we'll shut up, and we won't keep challenging the council. We're a critical friend to the council. We work with them, but we won't shut up until there is a genuine understanding and drive to put culture at the heart of its thinking of how it's going to change and shape the town, the city for the next generation.
The big thing is with the university, very, very quickly, because we're running out of time, is that all those kids coming in, they'll drift off to Cheltenham. There'll be buses, there are already buses that are shifting them off nightclubbing in Cheltenham. They're not staying in Gloucester.
They will, and you know, I'm not saying it's just the council's responsibility. This is, you know, we lived in an economy where it's a, you know, but also don't just rely on the market, because you know the market is ruthless. It probably will need a hand. So how about all those empty spaces in the city? How about let's like be a bit bolder, a bit more confident, and you know, forego a bit of commercial rent to get some amazing activity in there. It just requires bolder, braver thinking, ways to animate the city.
Well, thanks ever so much for Adam. I always love your energy, mate. Okay, let's go over to Tim. Tim, I hear that you're flip-flopping all over the place, mate, as leader. Are you going to be standing again?
I know that's not my plan. My plan is to stand down in May.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
I've had enough of all this politics stuff.
Yeah, well, yeah, I have. I mean, I'm very passionate about the district and stuff like that. But the last year in particular has been difficult. And to be honest, when I told people I was going to, I felt a bit of a failure, to be perfectly honest. I had to. You may have read, I've had to remove the Green members from my cabinet, purely because I didn't feel they were putting the district first. And I've always, rightly or wrongly, Mark, that's always what I've insisted my Rainbow cabinet have done, that the district, the council, the administration comes before party politics. And that's how we managed to survive 6 years. So I feel a bit of a failure because one of those Greens has been with me for 6 years. And if I can't prove to them that we need to leave politics outside, because at district council, party politics, I believe, causes nothing but grief. It causes nothing but division, and it doesn't get us anywhere. Actually, by coming together and speaking with one voice is how we've started to get funding in there. We've started to get, and things in like that. So it is, I feel a little bit of a failure. So my intention isn't to stand. However, I do have to say, this is probably where the flip-flop things like what happened yesterday. I know, I'm going to mention it as your part of the punchline story yesterday. Things
No,
like
you can mention it now, like we can mention
this Stagecoach decision. Once again, the Forest of Dean disproportionately and savagely cut. And in some ways, I don't just blame the company, although I think they've got a lot of answers, because if they take up a contract, a public service contract, I think that's very different to a private company taking on some sort of contract with them. This is a public service. People are reliant on these services. They should be duty bound to see themselves through to the end of some sort of contract. I also want to point a finger at the county council, because it's all very well then throwing their arms up in the air and saying how disgusting this is. We've had this time and time again from Stagecoach, and they continually gave Stagecoach the contract. We used to have a myriad of small bus companies that were serving these routes, were serving the people of the Forest of Dean. One by one, they had the contracts removed to them because it was easier and cheaper to give it to a bigger company in Stagecoach. Those companies aren't doing it anymore. So that's why we're in the position we're in. I'm currently doing a local plan. I'm going around shouting at the world, and people are shouting at me, we're going to do this. We can bring business to the Forest of Dean. You've been down here, Mark. Actually, the Forest of Dean business is thriving. We've just, we've helped them. We're at the business awards that Sam will be looking into later on. We're in there because we've helped 16 new businesses start up in the Forest of Dean. Sorry, my light's just gone in the last 12 months, just from giving them business grants. It's actually a real good. But now I'm thinking, well, how are people going to get here? How are people going to get to work? Because
how much have they cut then, Tim? What's the level of service?
It's savage. It's savage. It's the town routes. It's all those routes to the towns. We're going to have to try and look, see what we can do to help. But it's the same time. The last time they did cuts, again, it was the Forest of Dean and Cotswolds. This time it's the Forest of Dean and Cheltenham. Now I go to a lot of leadership Gloucester meetings, and this is where I am going to get political now, because I'm often asked to support certain ventures, and the district council is asked to support for certain ventures. I'm frankly sick of hearing about money being poured into Cyber Central. I'm frankly sick of money being poured into the M5 improvements, the missing link. We all need to great because it's great for Gloucestershire. How are people from the Forest of Dean supposed to get up to Cyber Central? Because they won't improve the roads for us. They won't improve the rail system, and now actually our bus services are going to be taken away from us as well. It's one-eyed. They're starting to take the easy option, and it's time politicians like me down in the Forest actually started saying something about it now, because I've been nodding along to it so long. I'm really supportive of things for Gloucestershire, really supportive, but we've got to spread the love a little bit, Mark. And I'm sick to death of us being pushed around like a little leper island that is just there to be treated as a visiting place. We're not. We're a vibrant community. We got vibrant businesses. We got real. Neil Ricketts doesn't bring his company back to the Forest of Dean, and he might want to expand. How are people going to get there? We're telling them you can't buy a car. We're telling them don't travel by the car, And every public transport route's being cut savagely. And there's no consultation, there's no discussion. I mean, we've got this thing now. You had Councillor Robinson, the guy from. Now, I've never met the guy, but he's been in the press the last couple of months about this new transport thing they've got. They got some money for on-demand transport. They want to trial out and all this kind of stuff. Well, he's never come and talked to us as a council about it. He's never come and talked to our officers about it. So I've got no idea what's happening. And I'm sorry, I know, look, Stagecoach are a business, they got to make business decisions. I think they have a lot of questions to answer, but so do the county council. And they can't just wash their hands of this and say, oh, it's terrible, it's terrible. They gave them the contract, they knew what they were dealing with.
All right, thanks ever so much for that, Tim. I really feel your passion there, mate. And that's why we need independence. Anyway, right, I got to go back over to you, Chris. What have you picked out from this week's punchline?
Well, I'm gonna leave you with a hope for the future. I wish Hugh Warren, the new sales director at Gloucester Rugby, the very best, because he is certainly walking into a difficult environment with Worcestershire and Wasps, and quite what rugby union will look like in 2 or 3 years' time, I'm not sure. But as my club is Gloucester, my brother played there for a number of years, I would like to wish him all the very best for the future. Let's hope Gloucester as a rugby club thrives going forward.
A lot of businesses not happy with the rugby club, but that's a different story for the sponsorship and stuff. Business boxes, food, lots of stuff going on. He's got a big job. Adam, what have you picked out in this week's punchline, please?
So my eyes are always going to when the word Gloucester City, and I'm intrigued and disappointed actually that, you know, when I see Gloucester in the first page of punchline, it's generally negative stories. There's, you know, a man selling drugs. There's a woman barred from the city. It's not the city I recognise. That is not the city. That is not the, you know, yes, there is poverty in the city and life is really hard. But what I see is this really amazing, resilient community, particularly the young people I work with. You know, some of them have had a difficult upbringing and they are the most incredible, hardworking, resilient young people. What I'd like to see is, and we know in Gloucester, we need more confidence. And I think, you know, we are looking to the media to help us in our journey. Come on, there is loads of great things happening in Gloucester. There are these artworks at the moment popping up all over the city. Residents are really intrigued. We don't know who's doing them. We need to cover stories like that because these are really exciting changes that happen in the city. So
the trouble is, Adam, I'll stop you there, mate. The trouble is there's no bugger around. I've got to go in there myself to run these stories, write them, take the pickies. This, no disrespect to the other media, they're not in town. You know, and everybody see them.
Yeah, I hear that, and you know, it's not, I'm not putting the responsibility purely on you. Again, like, it's a group effort, right? This is about Team Gloucester. So we need to work with you. The council needs to work with you. We all need to work together to get behind, you know, the story of Gloucester, the Gloucester we all believe in, the Gloucester we love. So, you know, it's a joint effort. It's not, you know, it's not just yourself, it's all of us.
No, it's true. No, I totally agree with you. We've got to try and get positive stories. And we do look for the positive stories and business stuff. And that's what the top 100, hopefully you've got your copy. I think I handed you a copy actually, was all about, you know, champion businesses. I'm going to finish up with you, Sam. We started with you, but I'm finish it. What's the story you picked out this week's punch, please?
Well, I just to say that I love your passion, Adam, and I think Mark really does a great job of trying to do the positives, but you don't want to massage what's happening on the negative side as well. But I was very interested in everything a lot of people are saying, and funnily enough, Tim, I may be becoming one of your residents because I live in Gloucester and love Gloucester, but we may be moving to Newent because my
very welcome. You'll be too, Sam.
But the problem is, we've only got one car, so I don't know how my wife's going to get to work. But anyway, that's another issue. Tim,
don't go by bus, mate.
We've got can't go bus by now. But the story that Tim actually mentioned, because it's something that today, for the first time, at 11 o'clock, we're doing our national awards for local councils and how they look after small businesses. And I have to say that I'm hugely impressed by all our councils and what they do for small businesses. And it's been great to see so many of them have entered our competition. I love what Tim does and Wendy and his team over in economic development over there. But we've got Cotswold, we've got Tewkesbury, we've got Gloucester, we've got Cheltenham, we've got Stroud. We've got some very, very good councils when it comes to helping business. And so we've got these national awards. I don't know who's won, but I know because I've seen all our local entries. The entries are brilliant. So I'm really hoping that when you get the next press release about the awards, there might be some local winners in it. If there isn't, I'll find a way of massaging it. Trust me. But I really think it's we do have a, you know, councils. It's the easiest thing in the world to knock the councils, and we've all done it. And Tim will probably agree. Sometimes it's right, sometimes it's wrong. But during COVID, particularly, they really showed their true colours, and they helped a lot of people. So big up to the councils, and I hope one of our teams win it. Thanks very much. Thanks ever so much for all of you.
Mark, I'm going to have to go. So.
That's okay. Thanks, Chris. I was just wrapping up. Thanks ever so much for joining Punchline Talks today. If you like the show, please like, share, and subscribe. And I'd like to thank our fantastic sponsors, Hazelwood Accountants and Business Advisors. Thanks very much. See you soon. Bye.
Bye.